Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. We are less than 3 weeks away from knowing more about the Nintendo Switch 2, but we are still kind of in the phase of not much going on. But don't worry, because we have a full show for you this week. First, we're going to run down the surprising amount of news from companies other than Nintendo. And then in the main segment, we will be celebrating the 15th anniversary of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver by running down an abridged history of Pokemon Remakes. Joining me for all of that is my former colleague at Game Informer, Kyle Hilliard. Kyle, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, man? Heart Gold, Soul Silver, that was the one with the pedometer, right?
It was. It sure was.
Yes, I played that one quite a bit, actually. Yeah,
I did as well, and it is, to this day, one of the best Pokemon games of all time.
Like is that kind of the sort of the reputation of it?
I think that we're going to get into this in the main segment, but I personally think it is the best overall Pokemon game. And when I compare, and I've said this on the show a few times in the recent weeks, when I compare like Pokemon Legends Arceus, the way that I say it to people is that's the best Pokemon game since Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
Wow. Cool.
That is my opinion.
I mean, not to dive into it, but yeah, I played that. I did play that one a lot, and the pedometer I was really sort of fascinated by. Like, I enjoyed that element of that game. And I think within the last couple years, I actually sold my copies of Heart Gold and Soul Silver because...
You didn't tell me?
I'm sorry, I should have called you, but I sold them because they were particularly valuable, if I remember correctly. Like, they were actually worth like way more than I was expecting. So I was like, I'm going to sell these guys.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I did see something like, so I was on the Sonic 3 movie mailing list, and I'm not somebody who's going to sell like stuff that is sent to me.
Yeah, no, that was, to be clear, I bought Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
Yeah.
I wasn't in this in the thick of doing video game stuff yet.
But I did see, and this is kind of news, I guess we could transition to the news segment with this. I did see a listing that NintendoLife.com called out on eBay that somebody is selling their Sonic 3 movie like promotional thing. If you're watching the video version, you can kind of see the Sonic like item box that it came in, but it came with like the working Genesis cartridge that like had like kind of like a character select screen that just showed like kind of Genesis pixelated things. You can see my full like rundown of what it is on my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube short up on it. But I saw somebody has an eBay listing selling the complete bundle of that for $28,000. And I was just like, who is going to buy that?
Yeah, it's so funny when it comes to eBay, because people will be like, oh my gosh, they're selling it for $28,000. It's like, well, you can put any number you want in there. It's like the thing.
I could sell like this Post-it note, or I could list this Post-it note that I have in my hand right now for like $35,000.
You could try.
Yeah. Value is what they actually pay for it. We'll see what it actually goes for. It'll be something interesting to watch, even though like, I'll never sell it because I'm not going to sell something that's sent as a promotional item.
Yeah.
I did get people reaching out, be like, hey, will you please sell this? And I'm like, nope, sorry. But Kyle, let's kick off the actual news segment with a couple of stories that we've been following in recent weeks on this podcast. We will be talking all about the Pokemon franchise during today's main segment. But a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a Bloomberg report that said Niantic was getting ready to sell its gaming division, including Pokemon Go, to mobile gaming giant Scopely. And that is precisely what has happened. The sale was announced this week for a total of $3.5 billion. Scopely has put out games like Star Trek Fleet Command, the insanely successful Monopoly Go, and still to this day, 7 years on, my daily play game, Marvel Strike Force.
Who's
still
making
somehow
you do
churning.
that, Brian? You don't have to do that.
It does. I mean, when I first picked it up and I was like singing the praises of it, because I really like the gameplay loop of that game resonates with me so much. And I'm also such a Marvel sicko that I remember I was on the Game Informer show talking about it. And Ben Hansen, who was the host at the time, was like, so how long do you see yourself just on that hamster wheel? Because that's basically what it is. It's like you unlock a character, you build them up, and then like you keep building them up, and then you start off with another character that they release like a week later and complete whatever tasks they give you. And I was like, not that long. And again, here we are. They're literally running their 7th anniversary celebration in game right now.
Wow.
But
Impressive.
It's not without it's definitely a love-hate relationship for me,
Yeah.
but
Speaking of love hate, man, Pokemon Go, I adored that game when it came out, right? I
same.
mean, we all did. It was like it changed my life, like not to be hyperbolic, but like truly, like the way I interacted with the world. I left like I went and explored my city that I lived in so much more, you know. But I've, over time I was became less and less interested. Now I haven't opened the game in years at this point. But like I'm actually kind of excited to see it leave Niantic's hands because I just don't think Niantic's ever been a good game developer, to be
No.
frank. Like they got the Pokemon license and it worked so perfectly for this sort of thing that Niantic does. Like it just was like the Venn diagram was like so perfect. And it was just like I played it in spite of what the design of the game was for so long, you know? So like my hope is that it being in someone else's hands, like that the game would be more fun and like maybe you would encourage me to open it back up again. And I don't know, maybe they'll make some radical changes, but it's also a very dangerous thing to make radical changes to because so many people's lives revolve around Pokemon Go.
Mhm. Well, I've got bad news for you, Kyle, because though the games division is now owned by Scopely, Ed Wu, who is the head of the Pokemon Go team, says that the team is actually not being broken up. They just now work under Scopely, which is
Okay, that's
very
good.
similar to what happened to Fox Next, to the original developer of Marvel Strike Force. They were acquired by Scopely, and then they they were developed by Scopely, and then they formed another like subsidiary called Boundless Entertainment. But it was in the original times all the original developers. As I whack my mic, it was all
I mean,
the original developers. So I think maybe there will be. I mean, Scopely is also notorious for their monetization.
yeah. I mean, that's good news, frankly, in like 2025, right? Like to be acquired and like the whole team comes over is like a good thing. And my hope my hope is like is that team has people who have like we've really wanted to do this with Pokemon Go for a long
Hmm.
time, but Niantic didn't want to do it or we were held back. But this new sort of owner is going to let us try something new and let us try these ideas because I'm sure the people who have worked on Pokemon Go for years have plenty that they want to do with it that they just can't. So I'm optimistic. And maybe I'll revisit Pokemon Go in a year or two and see something new and exciting. I don't know.
Yeah. And since 2023, just for context, Scopely has been owned by Savvy Games Group, which was founded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund in
Oh,
hopes that
geez.
it would
Okay.
grow the games industry in the company or in the country. And so, we will have that to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because they're Saudi Arabia has also done a lot of kind of sports washing efforts where they've used that sovereign wealth fund to bring a lot of sporting events to kind of launder the reputation of the country and some of the stuff that they've done.
Yeah.
So that is one thing to keep in mind. But in addition to Pokemon Go, Scopely also acquires Pikmin Bloom, Monster Hunter Now, and the other gaming properties. Uh, outside of the anxiety that this might lead to job loss for the developers or contraction, overall, you're pretty excited for this news.
I mean, I'm excited that it might improve Pokemon Go, but
Mm,
we'll see. I just like that genre which Niantic has essentially invented. I just like I don't know. I like Pokemon Go was huge for me, but then like nothing else that they've done clicked with me at all. Like Pikmin Bloom I haven't touched, like or I take that back. I did touch it. I did download it and like make an account and start it, but like had nothing about it was like interesting or like made me want to keep going with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just done with that genre. I don't know. I don't know, Brian. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, I checked out Monster Hunter Now at like a summer game fest. Like I had a
Yeah.
meeting with Niantic, and like it was like one of their lead designers was sitting down with me, showing me all the Pokemon Go stuff that was happening, showing me like the which was it was a cool thing. It was since you haven't been playing either. The update that they showed me back 2022, 2023, whatever year it was that I met with them, it was like routes that you could have people like tell you like, oh, if you like follow this route to go and like walk through this park, this will lead you to like a waterfall or something like that. So it's like actually like a guided tour of like points of interest within your
A
town.
cool idea. Yeah.
That is a cool idea. And then presumably, if you follow the route, it will also spawn Pokemon along the route.
Mhm.
So pretty cool stuff going on there. And then Monster Hunter Now was fun. It was like more action oriented, which I'm about. But
I mean, those are the three big ones, right? Like Pokemon Go, obviously number one, and then Pikmin and Monster Hunter are distant 2 and 3s,
yeah,
right?
Harry Potter they did for a while, and then that they shut that down a few years
Yep.
ago.
I remember
Um,
doing a story when I was the mobile editor at GameSpot. I remember talking to them about NBA All World a bit,
oh yeah,
and just even talking to them. I actually looked it up recently because Imran Khan was posting about Niantic games and stuff like that, and I remember that in the interview they were talking about how they were thinking of All World as like a metaverse game when like metaverse was the hot topic, that everyone was using. And I remember I asked them, I was like, what do you mean by metaverse is like a VR platform that like Facebook uses? Like, what are you talking about? And like their quote that they gave me was like, oh, it's the metaverse is like a mix between reality and this digital world, and like it just like made no sense what they were talking about.
you're like,
You
are you
know?
describing augmented reality?
Yeah, it just was so odd, and it just, I don't know, I don't think NBA All World really resonated much with people ultimately, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
But do you have any experience with any Scopely games? Like Monopoly Go has been their bread and butter. Like obviously Star
Oh,
Trek Fleet
I am
Command, Marvel Strike Force, stuff like that.
highly allergic to those kinds of games. I think they're despicable. I think they prey on an element of the psyche that is dangerous. I think like kids who play those games are conditioned to sort of like it's the same things that are getting flipped in their brain as gambling.
Oh yeah.
And I avoid them at all costs. I don't like those games. They are not trying to say anything. They're trying to sell you something, and I think they're awful.
Fair enough. And also, like, as somebody who plays one of those games every day, I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with you.
You get caught up in it, and it's just, I don't know, they scare me in a certain way. Like truly, I think it's bad for your brain.
Yeah, like if somebody asks me, should I play Marvel Strike Force? It's a resounding
It's
no.
a
And then I will
no.
immediately open up my phone to play Marvel Strike Force.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Brian. I hope you don't take that as me as sort of attacking what you do in your free time. Everyone's welcome to do with that what they want. But I just it's like this, maybe it's an old man in me, but it's like I want video games to be these like specific experiences that are artistically directed, and all those games are just storefronts. They're just avenues to buy things. And they're not even real things. They're fake things. uh,
Well, we will talk about a few of those games that you are yearning for, we'll say,
yeah.
in the rest of this news segment. But first, a reminder that you can support all things Nintendo by subscribing to the Patreon page, which gives you early and ad-free episodes as well as access to the community Discord for just $5 a month. And if you have been on the fence about joining a paid tier, I did just introduce a $3 a month tier, so you can check out the community Discord and get priority access for interactive episodes. You can also find my merch at teepublic.com if you need a new hoodie, t-shirt, magnet, coffee mug. I've got several designs you can check out over there. Kyle, what is your hype level for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4?
Oh, it was through the roof. And then when I learned that the way 4 is going to be structured, it's going to be traditional Tony Hawk with 2-minute timed levels, my excitement lowered down to just being on the roof. So it's all, which is to say, still very, very excited. I love
But hey,
Tony
you can
Hawk.
play Super Mario Odyssey on the roof. Just bring your Switch and you can set it up just like that initial trailer.
Exactly. There we go. But yeah, I love the Tony Hawk series, but 3 and 4 were like my starting lines, right? Like
Oh,
that
okay.
3 was like the one I had a friend who had a PS2 and we played 3 forever, and then 4 was like the first one that I personally owned, and I loved the structure of 4, which is like you, instead of having like 2 minutes to, you just play the level over and over in 2-minute chunks to complete a task, which is still fun. I still enjoy that. I loved how 4 was like, yeah, no, you just roam around this big level and then you activate tasks that could take up to 2 minutes. And like, I just loved how I didn't want to be kicked out of the level. Like I just wanted to keep playing Tony Hawk without having to reset every 2 minutes. And so 4 has always been my favorite for that reason.
Mm.
So like I'm very excited to revisit those levels and stuff like that, but I am bummed that it, from what I understand, I mean from official, communication from them, it sounds like it's just what it's going to be is like you play the Tony Hawk 4 levels at 2-minute increments, which is
Yes.
I'm not in love with that, but like I'm still very excited for Tony Hawk 3 and 4 for sure.
Though, I mean, that is the news story that we're going to talk about. So great
Right.
job running down what that that
Oh, I
news
did it.
is. But there will still be a free skate mode, and they are redoing the career mode challenges so
Okay.
that they fit within those 2-minute timer restraints.
I don't doubt that can be done. Yeah, for sure. Like that's not crazy. It's not like those
Mhm.
levels were like so massive or anything like that. They were bigger than traditional Tony Hawk levels, but like manageable.
So it's kind of like the difference between Mario 64, where you get a star and it kicks you out of the level, versus Mario Odyssey, where you get those power moons and it's like, all right, keep on to the next one without having
Yeah.
to go back to the hub world.
I mean, that was the thing about Banjo Kazooie. I think did it that way too, right? Like you could get a puzzle piece, but you didn't have to get kicked out of the level. Like
Mm.
that always bugged me. Like it's like just don't let me stay here, But I don't
But
know.
I actually don't mind this. Just maybe it's because I was raised on 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
4 was probably the least amount of time I put into one of like the main numbered entries because I felt like I was kind of falling off a little bit, and then Underground got me right back into it. Um, but yeah, 1 and 2 were my kind of like ultimate games for that era. I mean, 1 was why I bought a PS1 in the first place.
Yeah.
So like I reviewed Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 back in 2020 when it came out, and I absolutely loved it. And I am so excited for this. But I understand why people who were obsessed with 4 growing up and were hoping to like kind of experience a remake of that exact format would feel a little bit burned by this.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm withholding final judgment, of course. Like maybe I play it and I'm like, you know what, this totally works, and I like the consistency across the levels.
Hmm.
Like I understand why they did it, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm a little wary at least now, but it's not like I'm not going to play it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's Tony Hawk 3, like and 4, like it's still going to be great, assuming that they deliver a good product and like build on what was started with 1 and 2, because I loved the 1 and 2 remakes. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I do think there is something to be said about having consistency across 1 through 4. And then if maybe they want to do a remake of Underground 1 and Underground 2, maybe then they can bring kind of like the unlimited play style in
Is
that.
that, yeah, remind me. I mean, I definitely played Thug 1 and 2 and really enjoyed them back in the day. Those were also like 4 structure, right? Like you
Yes.
would go into, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe they'll do that, or maybe they'll even release like a DLC mode, but like gives you
Maybe.
the original career structure because people seem to be pretty upset about this. I don't know. Maybe there's got to be some way to remedy this and like kind of give people the best of both worlds. Like I said, there is the free skate mode, which is completely no timer. So if you do just want to kind of skate around,
Yeah.
you'll be able to do that. But yeah, if you're excited for this, like I am, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 comes to Switch and every other major platform on July 11th.
Hell yeah.
Kyle, here's one that I think you are going to be a particular fan of, Nintendo Switch Online. We have 2 new additions to the Game Boy library. First up, Donkey Kong, which you likely know
Right.
as Donkey Kong 94,
Yeah.
joins the catalog. This is a 1994 remake of the original arcade game that had so much content, it might as well be an all new game. 100 levels spread across 10 stages in that one. And then the second game is another one that you're going to be excited. This is the Kyle Hilliard update.
Is it really?
Mario's Picross.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Which I haven't dived into that. But yeah, no, I love Picross. Picross is the
I know
best.
you
I do
do.
wonder, I worry though if I go back to that Game Boy game if it's just going to feel so, sticky and hard to play. But no, I I fall down the Picross rabbit hole every couple of months for sure.
So I have never played a Picross game. I know you are like Mr. Picross. You
Yeah.
always are advocating for it. Whenever there's a Picross game, you are advocating for it to be included in any lists, any like, hey, most anticipated if there's one announced. What is like the selling point for this? Because I think it's hard to sell folks
Yeah.
on just like, oh, it's number-based puzzles.
Gosh, I mean, the closest analog is like, and which I don't do this. I've never done this, but why can't I? You know the number game where you have the grid and you have to make each row has to have every number. Why can't I? Sudoku, right?
Sudoku,
I
yeah.
don't know why I
I was
couldn't
thinking
think of the name.
Minesweeper.
Yeah, I don't know why I was struggling to think of the name, but Picross I think is in the same category as Sudoku, where it's like people might look at it and be scared away by numbers and be like, "Oh, it's like a math puzzle." It's not what it is. It's like it's a geometry puzzle where numbers are used to sort of track things,
Hmm.
and you just spend like 2 to 8 minutes on each puzzle, and you're just sort of like filling out the lines, and then like the thing that's so satisfying about it is it's like you know how to solve the puzzle, you know what you're doing, after you do the first couple you get the hang of it and you understand what you're doing, and then like you're building towards an image, and then at the end when you solve it, it all kind of comes into focus and you get to see this image that you were working on, and it's just really comfortable and satisfying. It's like it's the right amount of challenge where it's like not too crazy, and like you're just constantly sort of like getting this little satisfying hit of like, oh, I completed this puzzle, and look, oh, there's a picture I made, cool, all right, now do the next one. And I don't know, I just find it so satisfying and like relaxing. It's like lately I've been playing Balatro on my phone a lot as my go-to, just like, I've got 5 minutes, let me play like a couple hands of Balatro. And like when I'm in the thick of a Picross game, that's what it becomes. It's like, I'm just, I'm gonna play a couple Picross puzzles, I'm gonna throw something on the TV that I can listen to, and it's charming. But it also is a hard pitch if you've never played Picross. It's hard for me to be like, yeah, get this Picross game and you're gonna get it, because it's like I don't know. I mean, I fell in love with it for the DS. I remember I believe it's Nintendo published. It was just called Picross DS. And the thing that I was kind of like charmed by, it was $20, which was like weird for a Nintendo game to come out on
Hmm.
DS and be $20. And it just was like, it took over my life. Like I just loved Picross DS, and then like Picross 3D, and like I don't play every Picross game because they truly do release one like two a year or something like that.
Really?
But I will check in. They've been doing a lot of themed ones. I like they did a Sega one, somewhat
Oh,
recently.
cool.
That was like, it was just like you're making like Sonic pictures and stuff like that, which is super fun.
All right, I
So,
gotta pause the recording and go download that right now.
have you ever played Picross? Like, have you
No,
ever?
I
No,
haven't.
I as an experiment, because I'm sure you would like it, because I mean, if you like puzzle games at all, if you like Tetris, you'd probably like Picross. It would like it's like playing Tetris but without the sort of intensity of Tetris. You can take your time and stuff like that. But I would be very curious to see if someone just picked up a Picross game who had never played one in 2025. I would want to know if they enjoyed it and if they became like a Picross super fan, or if they just played a couple puzzles and they're like, I don't get it. I don't know why you like this so much.
Well, maybe I'll have to try that out because I do like the themed ones. Like I
Yeah,
never played like Crypt of the Necrodancer, but then when Cadence of Hyrule came out, I'm like, well, I'm about this because I love Zelda and I love Zelda music, and like, of course. So like, if
yeah.
there's like a Zelda themed one or Mario themed one or Sonic themed one, like that'd probably be my best chance to get into it.
I don't even know how you get it in 2025, but related to like the Nintendo Club points and stuff like that, you there was a period of time where you could get Twilight Princess Picross for
What?
3DS, and I remember just like ravenously trying to collect because you had to like check into Nintendo.com every day and like collect coins and stuff, and then
Yeah.
you could redeem it for that game, which I was like beeline. I was like, I have to get this game, but like today, I don't even know how you would get it. Like, it's not like you can go to the store and just buy it. I don't think.
Oh my god, there are so many Picross games on Switch.
Oh yeah, no. There's Picross S Genesis and Master System Edition.
Yeah, I see that.
It's on sale right now. It's 30% off.
All Picross games seem to be on sale
Oh
on Switch
really? Maybe I
currently.
should catch up on a few that I haven't gotten. But
There's
that's the one.
Picross S Namco Legendary Edition. There's
Oh, that one's, yep.
Picross Records of the Shield Hero. There's Doraemon and F Characters Edition.
Right. Yes. Yeah. They do
Logiark
like,
Grimoire.
yeah. There's some
Goodness
based on like
gracious.
anime and stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, the Sega Master System one. If you were like interested in trying one, Brian, like that's the one to get. Is the Genesis and Master System.
Okay. There's so much DLC. Good lord. For Picross S Plus has a ton of DLC.
Oh, I guess you know what this is. I see. I wasn't aware of this. When did this come out? Because it looks like it's like that you could
February
just
29th of last year.
okay. Yeah, I'm out of the Picross loop, but like this looks like almost like a way to play all the 3DS Picross games and stuff. The E series. Okay, yeah,
Oh,
Picross
okay.
E is like the ones that came out for 3DS, and I played a ton of those.
Is that a good one?
Yeah, they're
Should
good. I
I should
mean,
I buy it for $3.50? It's currently on sale, but then all the DLC's $5 a pop.
I don't know what all's in. What does it come with without the DLC? I wonder. Is it just like the first couple E games? Just get the Sega
Three.
one,
It
dude. If
says
you're
it
gonna
boasts
get
a
one, just
total
get
of
the Sega
300
one.
puzzles.
Get the Sega one, and then see if you like it, and report back to me. Just let me know
All
what you
right.
think.
This is riveting for the listeners here. But both of those games, Mario Pitcross and Donkey Kong 94, are available now for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers within the Game Boy catalog.
Hell yeah.
Kyle, we know that Nintendo Switch 2 is on the horizon, and we are very excited about that. But the big difference between the Switch launch and the Switch 2 launch is that Nintendo is no longer alone in the handheld hybrid device market. And we have things like the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. But according to a report from Windows Central, Xbox is preparing to launch its own handheld device later this year. And according to the report, Xbox is partnering with another PC company for the project,
Hmm.
and it's currently codenamed Keenan and will run Windows, the Microsoft Store, and PC Game Pass. But it also sounds like you'll be able to customize it and install other software, including Steam, if you want. And
Weird. Okay.
then from there, the report continues that Microsoft will then release its own dedicated handheld device in 2027, which presumably will be fully their own and free from any partnerships.
2027. What a weird. This is all rumor, right?
I mean, it's a report
A
from
report. Okay.
Windows Central, which does have a pretty good track record.
I believe it. I trust it. I was like, why? I wonder why 2027. Like, but I guess it's because there was a leak, I guess,
Prototyping
or a
phase and all
report. Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And I mean, Xbox itself has confirmed that they have been investigating or at least prototyping handheld devices in the past.
Yeah.
And like I said, Windows Central has a pretty strong track record. Plus, I do think it makes a lot of sense with Xbox's recent "This is an Xbox" marketing push, where they're just like, it's like desktop PC, and it says "This is an Xbox," and it's like ROG Ally, "This is an Xbox," a smart TV, and it says the same thing. So
Yeah.
it would make sense for them to expand the definition of an Xbox into that realm. The report also said that it's going to look very Xbox-ish with like its like design conventions and everything.
Hmm.
So I would imagine, kind of either black or white with like the big circular power button or whatever.
Yeah. I wonder if it'll be like the PlayStation device that lets
Portal.
you. Yeah. I wonder if it'll look like a Portal and that it'll be an Xbox controller like split in half.
Hmm.
You
I
know.
mean, I hope so. The Xbox controller has been amazing for the
Yeah.
past like 15 years, 20 years. God.
Yeah. This sounds cool, but I don't know. I'm happy with my Steam Deck, and this sounds like not a replacement for that. I almost wish it was more focused, right? I wish it was literally like it's an Xbox handheld, right? Like it's like you log into your Xbox account and you play Xbox games
I mean,
on
it
this
sounds
thing.
like that's what it is, but then you can also install Steam, which I think is a cool thing because
Yeah, I guess so.
that's the problem right now is that I can't use my Game Pass Ultimate on my Steam Deck unless I mod it and everything, which I know a lot of people have. But
Yeah,
like,
like it's not even like a mod. It's just like software installation that's harder
it's
than it
like
should be, you know?
jailbreaking it basically, right?
Well, I mean it's jailbroken. It's not like a closed ecosystem on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is just a PC, you know? Like
Hmm.
it's not you can just go to a browser and like install Epic Games stuff on there. Like it's all doable, but it is tricky. Like it is a little complicated, you know? Um so like this thing, which is like it would probably be the same deal. It's like yeah, it works as like an Xbox machine and you can get Steam on there, but it's going to be a little bit of a pain, you
Yeah,
know?
probably.
Maybe, or maybe not. I don't
So
know.
one thing I've noticed, I have a Steam Deck OLED and I have a Switch.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, I'm taking all these trips with Game Informer. And so I got a Steam Deck and I was like, all right, I'll bring both of them everywhere I go. And then I ended up just like firing up my Switch pretty much every time I got on a plane. And I think a lot of that was because I had Balatro on my Switch at the time. But, it became so bulky that for shorter trips, I ended up not even bringing my Steam Deck because it was just like, this is such a bulky device to
Yeah.
like try to put in my backpack and like
It's your whole backpack. Yeah. It's heavy, man. Like that's the big thing. Like that's why I still do spend a lot of time on. I play my Steam Deck a lot, but it's almost in protest because I just wish I could play. I wish this game that I'm playing ran as well as it does here on the Switch, because I love the sort of lightness of the Switch.
yeah. Well, that makes sense. I just don't know if I would be in the market. I mean, I know that everybody's kind of doing like the gold rush of the handheld hybrid whatever device,
Yeah.
kind of the way that they did with motion controls and VR headsets for a while. I think that there's a little bit more viability because there is a successful use case. I mean, I guess there was the Wii, which was a successful use case for motion controls,
Yeah.
but like the Switch's runaway success, and then the Steam Deck has also done, I don't nowhere near Switch numbers, but it's done pretty well,
Yeah,
like
Steam
a
Deck's great.
few million units sold.
I mean, it's got to be Steam's most successful hardware that it's ever made.
Well,
They
yeah,
tried to
they
make controllers. They tried to sell like
Steam
Steam
Box.
dedicated PC Steam box, right? And that just like didn't go anywhere. Yeah,
Well, the reason for that was they like just had Alienware do it, and they were just like, all right, yeah, these are just like expensive Alienware computers that sit on your entertainment console and plug into your TV, and it's like, well, that's cool, I guess, but it's not really like
there's nothing stopping me doing that with my current desktop, right? It's kind of
exactly. I could just buy
yeah.
a really long HDMI cable, and
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was a Game Farcer bit that we did once. Like that was like we said like Steam announces Steam Pipe, we called it. Like and it was just a really long HDMI cable. Like that was the whole bit. But it was like totally true.
yeah. Um, so that is, something to keep an eye out and see if maybe Xbox will announce that this summer for a later this year release. But that's the
Yeah,
report out of
I
Windows
love
Central.
I love playing handheld games. Like I know Brian, you're less of a handheld gamer, but like I love sitting on the couch and playing my Steam Deck in my hand. Like I'm all for Microsoft doing that. I'm all for Sony doing like a version of it that's just not a streaming device.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I just
for
want to be
sure.
able to play that stuff locally. I love the Vita and the PSP. But yeah, I don't know. This sounds just like it will do everything my Steam Deck already does, which I'm a little like it kind of lowers some of my interest in it.
Yeah,
We'll see.
fair enough. Yeah, we'll see what it happens when they announce it. I was excited because I was like, okay, cool, Game Pass like on the go.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, at the same time, I don't think I need a third handheld device to carry on a plane with me.
Yeah.
So next up, one of the most unexpectedly captivating niche games of this last generation is getting a sequel, Kyle. Just this morning, Future Lab released a teaser announcement trailer for PowerWash Simulator 2.
Ah, right.
And, the trailer itself, I think, is like 38 seconds. But the graphics look better, at least in the very short trailer. And then the Steam page, there are a few more details of what to expect. So I did not know this was the name of the city, but you return to Muckingham to clean up the town with an
Cool.
all new campaign. Plus, there are new locations like Sponge Valley, Power Falls, and Lubra City. And there's also split screen co-op being added to the experience. And then you can customize your home base with collectible furniture and trinkets. And then you can invite your friends over to show off your home, kind of Animal Crossing-esque.
That's
And
cool.
then
That's all.
there's
Split screen co-op's big. I think that's cool.
Yeah. So what reads to me is improved soap physics, because they say,
right.
quote, enhanced soap that clings to stubborn stains and annihilates dirt. And like, I know this game is fun, and I've played like several levels of it, both on Switch and Xbox, but I never thought I would be having this, like, that would be a feature that I would be reading off when I started a Nintendo podcast back in 2021.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean,
Uh,
but that's what the game is. You know, it makes sense. Yeah.
Gotta get off those stubborn stains.
It's like when the Counter-Strike recently, right? They had that whole video on like smoke. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
big change here is smoke, and then you watch and you're like smoke, and you watch the video, and you're like, okay, yeah, I could see how that would change Counter-Strike a lot. You know.
Did you put any time into PowerWash Sim?
No, I didn't really. I think I downloaded it and I played like 20 minutes once with my kiddo, but I don't know. Yeah, it just didn't. I don't know. It didn't do anything for me for whatever reason. But like I get it. Right, I see people
Mhm.
playing it and are charmed by it, and it's like, yeah, that makes complete sense. It's just like, hey, you see this giant pile of dirt? What if we gave you everything you needed to like get rid of it? And it's like that. Yeah, okay, that sounds cool. Yeah.
I know that our Game Informer's former production director, Margaret Andrews, is obsessed with Power Wash Simulator, and I sent that to her this morning, and she was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
So
she's
she's
not
very
alone.
excited for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like it enough to have it on two systems, but I've never played past like the third level.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's like, okay, I get it. That's kind of the sentiment that I have after playing it for like an hour. I'm like, all right, yeah, all right, maybe I'll return to this one day, and then I
Yeah,
never
it's a good
do.
like podcast game, you know.
Oh, so good for podcasting. But then again,
Yeah.
so is Vampire Survivors.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's games that I enjoy more that are better podcast games.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah.
So the game is not announced for Switch just yet, but I would be so shocked if this does not come at least to Switch 2, given the popularity of Power Wash Simulator 1 on Switch 1. So something to keep an eye out. Maybe in 3 weeks they will announce that it is coming to Switch 2. Who
Yeah,
knows?
it's gonna be exciting to see what is a launch game for Switch 2. I bet it's gonna be a pretty big third party sort of collection. I bet, you know.
Oh yeah, and
We'll
I
see.
would be shocked if Nintendo doesn't at least have 3 games coming out at Switch 2 launch, whether
Well, I'm
it's
saying
something huge.
like
But I'm saying
they'll
on
have
like
Mario
them and
Kart.
then also third party stuff as
Yeah, I
well.
think it's mostly third party. I like I'm just saying I think it's gonna be a lot more impressive than Switch 1, which was like, you know, Snipper Clips and Street Fighter and Bomberman, right? There just wasn't like a ton on day one. I know all we needed was Zelda anyway, but like I
Hey, we
bet
had
Switch 2 is gonna have a lot more.
yeah, Breath of the Wild, and don't forget 1-2 Switch.
Right? Yes, I did.
How
I
could
did
you?
forget 1-2 Switch.
I will say I had more fun with everybody 1-2 Switch than I did the original
There's
1-2
some fun stuff in
Switch.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was fun. I don't know.
I don't know. Fun
Uh,
maybe is too strong a word, but like, but there was some funny stuff on there. Sure.
yes. So next up, a few months ago, Kyle, I covered the fact that Nintendo is opening a new dedicated store in San Francisco,
Cool.
and now we know when it opens. This location at San Francisco's Union Square offers exclusive items only available at that location, which is par for every other. Like I have stuff that's from Nintendo Tokyo, I have stuff that's from Nintendo Redmond, I have stuff from Nintendo New York. So
Hmm.
that is consistent with the other stuff in terms of like, you go to this one location, it'll have like the general stuff, like okay, you can get like a dry bones plushie or something, and all of them will have that. But then there will be certain things that are like exclusive to the Nintendo San Francisco store. Um, but yeah, the opening date's set for May 15th. And then I looked at the other things that Nintendo has going on. So Epic Universe's Super Nintendo World opens in Orlando on May 22nd, just 1 week
Oh,
later.
I didn't realize that was so far along. Okay, cool.
Then the reveal of Switch 2 on April 2nd, plus whatever release date is probably happening in like, this general time frame. I'm guessing mid-June for my Switch 2 release date. That's my bet that I have
Yeah,
right now.
I like that. I like that time frame.
So Nintendo is poised to have a pretty busy spring/early summer here.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I mean, it would make up for the sort of the doldrums of the last couple months. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, I guess. Doldrums sounds harsh, but like they're just the last 6 months for Nintendo have been kind of, I mean, Echoes of Wisdom I enjoyed, but like there's not a lot else.
have you been to any of the Nintendo stores?
Yeah, I went to the New York one once. I think it was actually went for the Switch One sort of
Whoa.
reveal event. I think we went to the Nintendo store. Yeah, it's cool.
I think that's when it was called Nintendo World. And now it's just Nintendo New York.
Okay, because
'Cause I
Nintendo
think
World, they don't want it to be confused with the theme park, I
I
guess.
bet that's the reasoning, because I think it was somewhat recent. Like, I mean, by somewhat recent, I mean like the last like 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
that they changed it from Nintendo World New York to just Nintendo New York, because they probably were like, oh, we need to call this Super Nintendo World something, and
Yeah.
Nintendo World's already taken. So let's have the amusement park that's probably going to do exponential revenue
Yeah.
take precedent for the better name.
Yeah. That's probably the right call. Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been to 3 of them, which I get. Is that all of them that I've been to so far?
You tell me.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's Redmond, there's New York, there's Tokyo. I've been to all those. Redmond, you need to be escorted by a Nintendo employee, which I've.
Okay, because when you said Redmond, I was like, I didn't know there was one in Redmond, but that's like it's like connected to probably one of their.
It is at Nintendo of America's headquarters, but it's past the lobby,
Right.
so you can't get in unless somebody escorts you in there.
Got it.
So I've spent way too long in that store because it's like, oh well, I'm in this like special store that not everybody can go to.
Yeah.
I should buy something cool, and then I just get decision paralysis. So I don't know. But Kyle, let's close out with this. I have been beating the drum of how badly I want a new Star Fox game.
Yeah.
And wait, let me rephrase that before we move on. I've been beating the drum of how badly I want a good Star Fox game, because those are harder to come by, it turns out.
There's not a lot of those. Yeah.
So one of the original Star Fox developers seems to agree, and that is Giles Goddard, who was an original programmer on SNES Star Fox. He left Nintendo, I think, in like 2002, and founded an independent studio called Vitae, which put out games like Theta for DS in 2007, Rock and Roll Climber for WiiWare in 2009, and then the studio also worked on the Steel Diver games, plus a game that I'm not familiar with called Tank Troopers.
Okay,
So
I vaguely remember Tank Troopers. Yeah.
So anyway, Vitae was rebranded as Chuhai Labs in 2020 and put out a 1080 snowboarding VR spiritual successor called Carve Snowboarding in 2021.
Okay, I remember
And
this. Yeah.
this week, the studio announced its next project called Wild Blue. And the caption on the teaser trailer says, quote, "Join Bowie Stray and the Blue Bombers in Wild Blue as they soar through the skies on a mission to save the world in this action-packed, nostalgic journey." And on the Steam page, there are some screenshots, and it looks very much like modern Star Fox style game. And the game info on the Steam page says, quote, "Wild Blue reimagines the classic on-rails adventures of the 90s. Plus, in the teaser trailer, it opens up with like a character talking as like Fox would in like the start of Star Fox 64, where it's just like, all systems go. And then you hear a character start saying, do a barrel roll. And before he finishes, another character interrupts and is like, we don't call them that here. So it definitely sounds like a Star Fox spiritual successor to me, especially since it starts with Giles Goddard's like saying like, "Hi, I'm Giles Goddard, developer." I think he said the only developer behind Star Fox or something like that, and he's cut off. So they're very. I mean, it's kind of an unhinged announcement trailer if you've watched it.
Yeah, I didn't particularly like it. I'm excited about the idea of like a successor to Star Fox from the people that made Star Fox originally, but I thought that I didn't think that trailer was very good because it really didn't show the game at all.
No.
Like
I was actually shocked when I went to the Steam page and there were screenshots, and I'm like, well, you could have just
there
shown,
are?
like,
I didn't even see that. See, I didn't even know that. That's
yeah, I was like,
what's it
well, let
called
me check
again,
out
the game?
Wild Blue.
Wild Blue. Okay, good name.
I wish listed it, which you can do on Steam right now, but
Yeah.
I would be so shocked, even more shocked than if PowerWash Simulator 2 doesn't come to Switch 2. I would be so shocked if this does not come to Switch 2 at some point, given like just the overlap. It's like if when they put out when a company puts out a Metroidvania and it doesn't come to Switch, I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Why'd you make this?
Or like a non-first part. Like, I understand that Astrobot isn't necessarily going to come to Switch because you know, it's a PlayStation developed game, although that hasn't stopped other PlayStation developed games from coming over. But like, if it's like a 3D or 2D platformer and it's like you're not on Switch, it's like, come on, guys, like, you know where the core audience is here.
Yeah, I'm sort of like trying to remember. Is Goddard right? Is his name
Giles Goddard?
Giles? Because it was there was an interview I remember seeing with him once talking about the development of Star Fox and how they sort of came up with the sort of tech to get that game working on Super Nintendo, and Nintendo was really sort of enamored with it. And Nintendo and Miyamoto were the ones that were like, we want to make it like animals, right? Like we want it to be like animal characters and like puppets, and be kind of inspired by those old like TV shows with the puppets and the pilots and stuff like that. And I think it was Goddard who was like really resistant to that and was like disappointed that it was getting sort of kiddified, you know, and like having, so it's like, it's interesting that now all these years later he's like, it's like, oh, we're gonna make some anthropomorphic animal pilots, you know. But I could be misattributing here, I could be wrong about that.
So it's interesting because, like, you know, Star Fox SNES was made by this Western development team primarily.
Yeah.
Giles Goddard, Dylan Cuthbert. I'm
Yes.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is funny, by the way. I was at GDC back in like 2016, and I was interviewing this guy about this game, and then he gave me his card at the end, and it says Dylan Cuthbert, and I'm like, oh, I've been
Oh, you didn't
interviewing
realize who
like
you're talking to?
interviewing like the main guy behind Star Fox for the past like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
remember I had a moment like that once where I was talking to somebody, a Japanese developer. I think it was I don't even remember what the game was, but at the end, they just casually threw out that they're like, "Oh yeah, I did a lot of work on Mega Man X2." And I was like, I remember like like they were almost saying it like as they were closing the door on me, and I was like, I wish I had known. I would have talked to you about Mega Man X2 for the last hour. But oh well.
like, we've stalked you on social media. We know that we couldn't bring that up until you're literally out the door, and we
had
can
to
slam the
save
door
it.
in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always funny when like you're talking to somebody. Like I was talking to somebody, I don't want to say who it was, but like, you know, just like for a very long time at the Game Awards this past December. And then I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, like, what do you do? Like, why are you out here? And he named like, oh, I work for this studio, and it was like one of my favorite studios. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Did you work on this game and this game and this? And he's like, oh yeah, I was doing like design and stuff on all those games. And I'm like, we could have been hanging out this whole time. Like, we could have been talking about all these amazing games that you've made.
That's work for them, man. They don't talk
I know. So what would your interest level be on a game like Wild Blue, particularly considering like Giles is involved?
Yeah, no, it's high. I really have a lot of affection for Star Fox 64 in particular, and like all the other attempts at Star Fox following that just always try to do something weird with it, you know, like Star Fox Adventure and like Assault was like did a lot of like on foot sequences. I mean, the Star Fox Assault has the first level is really great because it's just sort of a traditional on rail Star Fox game, but then it just kind of, the further it goes along, the less interested you get. And then there was the strategy game on DS, which was like, you know, which was by
Command?
Cuthbert, I think, right? And yeah, Command, I think, which is like an interesting idea, but it's like, I just kind of want, I know it's simple design, right? It's I think that's like people are just scared of like making a design that simple in like the modern video game era, because it is kind of like a classic arcadey style of game, but like I always just like, I liked the world of Star Fox and I liked the sort of simplicity of it. And I remember I was playing it Split Fiction, and there's a level where you're chasing a train that has like a bomb on it, and it was just so reminiscent of that 64 level, and I could just like hear the dialogue in my head because I replayed that level so much. So like I'm hoping that this Wild Blue game is like, the things I want is like kind of straightforward gameplay, like a fun sort of trajectory and like levels that look interesting, but like the gameplay is pretty simple. And then just like I hope it's like a fun set of characters in a world, you know, like I'm hopeful for it for sure. And I think the Star Fox sort of DNA is interesting.
Yeah, because that part that you mentioned right there is so crucial, and like an underrated part of the Star Fox experience is the characters. Because like if Fox and Falco and Slippy and Peppy were just absolute duds with like no personality, I don't think there's like as much appeal to that formula. But like they have such great chemistry. And I remember, I mean, N64, the having fully voiced dialogue on the N64 was wild. And then also that was the introduction of the Rumble Pack.
Yeah,
So like
that's right.
before Star Fox 64, controllers just sat completely motionless, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think about in 2025.
Yeah,
Nowadays, when a controller doesn't rumble when something happens, you're like, is my battery low or something?
Yeah. It is funny that that's so common now. Yeah. But I think it's cool. I think I'm interested to see it. Yeah.
But Kyle, if you have not check this out. I'm not going to run down the idea again. I don't know if you were on the podcast, one of these episodes where I covered Retro Studios' pitch for a new Star Fox game that was rejected.
Right, I'd
So,
seen because that like leaked out there, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
the basically the guy who made the pitch, like it was like 10 years after the fact, like talked about what it was. Go seek that out if you have not
yeah, I've
already.
seen him
I've
build
talked
it
about
up.
it
Yeah,
so often on this show that I don't want to subject the listeners to that again. But go check that out if you haven't already. But
yeah.
we are going to take our first break of this episode, and when we return, we are going to go through the history of the Pokemon franchise and remakes. We will be right back. We are back, and it feels like every single Pokemon day, people cannot help themselves but request a new remake they would like to see. And it seems like the most common requests in recent years have either been Gold and Silver or Black and White. But despite all that speculation and all those requests, neither of those have come to fruition during the Switch generation. However, the Pokemon Company is certainly no stranger to remakes. In fact, it seems like the Pokemon franchise is one of the most, if not the most, remake-friendly series of all time. And since this week is the 15th anniversary of perhaps the greatest Pokemon remake ever, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I wanted to take some time just to chat through the history of the various remakes the series has given us. So, first of all, as I was going through these, there was one qualification question that I had for you, Kyle. Do you consider the mid-gen refresh games, kind of like Yellow, Crystal, like kind of like the final version of each generation? Is that a remake or just a new version of the game?
I would consider that a new version of the game. I would
Okay.
put that in the same tier as like Persona 5 Royal or something like that.
So not a remake, just like an enhanced version of it.
Yeah, like a game of the year edition, the final version.
Okay.
Like if
Glad we're on the
that's
same
how I
page with
feel
that.
about it. Yeah.
Because there was a moment where I was putting together this list and I was like, all right, do I include Yellow? Do I include Crystal? Do I include Platinum? And then I was like, what am I talking about? Those are definitely not remakes. Those are
Yeah.
just
No, I don't think so.
those are just
Yeah,
ultimate versions of a game,
Ultra
basically.
Sun, right?
Yeah. So what was the first Pokemon remake that you remember playing?
Gosh, I was like weirdly. My Pokemon relationship is odd because like I played Gold a lot. That was my first one, and then I played them pretty casually. I played Heart Gold and Soul Silver because I was nostalgic for that one. But I didn't play. Was it Omega? No. What are the Game Boy
Omega
Advance?
Ruby Alpha
Yeah,
Sapphire.
I
Or
didn't
wait,
play.
yeah, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire.
Well, that's the DS
3DS.
or 3DS one, which I
3DS.
reviewed that one and quite liked that one a lot. Actually, there was a lot I liked about Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But yeah, Heart Gold and Soul Silver I think was like the only one that I played that I got excited to play. Leaf Green, that's what I was thinking of. Like those,
Hmm.
I didn't play that generation. I'm very in and out on Pokemon, right? Like I'm not like a. I was for a period at Game Informer was the like Pokemon reviewer, and I kind of just like tripped and fell into that. It was like weird. Like now we have a lot of like, or rather like when Game Informer was concluding, we had a lot of like young people there that like were bigger Pokemon fans, and you were a bigger Pokemon fan than I was as well. And so but it was weird like during that 2014 era I was like weirdly the biggest Pokemon fan on staff. But I
Which
mean I
is
like Pokemon to be clear, but yeah, so yeah, I Heart Gold and Soul Silver was the one that I played the most because I really liked the pedometer. I thought the
yeah.
pedometer was like really cool.
So my first remake that I ever played. So my history with Pokemon, I played Red and Blue and Yellow like completely front to back, like probably like 6 times when I was a kid. And then Gold and
Oh
Silver
really?
came out, and I was just like, I don't want to learn new Pokemon. Like I don't want to
I don't
learn
want to learn new Pokemon.
like I
Yeah.
already know the 151 like backwards and forwards. Like I know all that. So I didn't ever play Gold and Silver like in its heyday.
Right.
And then I was just kind of like, all right, yeah, I don't care about Ruby Sapphire or any of these other ones. And basically I shared this sentiment with somebody in college, and I was just like, yeah, man, I wish they would just put out like a new game with just the original 151. And he was like, "Oh, do you know about Fire Red and Leaf Green?" And I'm like, "What's that?" And they're like, "It's a Game Boy Advance remake, so like better graphics and
Yeah, it looks
everything.
great. Yeah.
It looks awesome." And it the way he described it was, it's just the original ones without any of the stupid ones that they announced later, or they
The
made
stupid
later.
ones.
And I was like, okay, well, let me try that. And I got a copy and I was playing it. And I'm like, this is everything that I've ever wanted. So that was my like reintroduction to Pokemon. And then I didn't
That got you back in, kind
well, I
of.
didn't play Pokemon again for probably another 10 years after that, because like it was XY that got me back into the series like full time. And then I went back and played a bunch of the games that I missed, like Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and like a lot of the games like Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire shortly after that. Um, but yeah, like the XY was what got me back into it. And I think the way that they really did it was they started doing things um, like, hey, like you'll get a starter Pokemon that's an all new to this generation, but then like a few hours into the game, you can pick a Gen 1 starter. Like you can choose Charizard or Charmander,
Yeah.
Squirtle, or Bulbasaur. And I'm like, well, that's the coolest thing ever. So that's why I ultimately got back into it through that. And then like, I was off to the races then with like Sun and Moon, and
Yeah.
eventually Sword and Shield, and now Scarlet and Violet. But let's start running down the history of some of these things. So 2004, we got Fire Red and Leaf Green, which was a Game Boy Advance remake of 1998's Pokemon Red and Blue on Game Boy.
Yeah. Those were
And,
huge. Like that was a big deal. Yeah.
yeah, it really was. And Junichi Masuda was, he had just taken the reins not long before that as like kind of the guy in charge of Pokemon. And basically, according to him, the development team wanted to approach like this game through the idea of simplicity. So they used the same engine as Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, which let them develop faster, and also made it so Fire Red and Leaf Green was like completely compatible with Ruby and Sapphire. So they could interact and trade and battle with people on Ruby Sapphire, which was a really cool feature as well.
Yeah.
And the reason that the team went with Fire Red and Leaf Green, which was using the Japanese red and green instead of the international red and blue, I was looking into that, and Masuda actually had a column on the Game Freak website back in 2004. So here's an excerpt from that. He said, quote, "If we follow the naming scheme of the original series, the new games should be Fire Red and Water Blue. But I wanted to use green for the following reasons. 1, a leaf is a symbol of peace. 2,
Okay.
fire and water are opposing concepts, so it seems like a conflict. 3, on the jacket, we wanted to have a colorful drawing of Bulbasaur. A leaf may not be immediately familiar to Japanese kids, but for kids overseas, it is an easy concept to grasp. In this
Okay.
world of conflicts, we wanted to give a name that is suggestive of a peaceful world. As a result, we decided for the name Leaf Green all over the world. I'm very glad."
I'm very glad. Yeah, I always thought it was just because we didn't get green in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of fun. It was just kind of charming, that like we finally got green. Because right in Japan it was blue and
Red,
it was blue and in
red
Japan
and
it was
green.
blue and green, right?
Red
They
and
didn't
green.
have red in Japan, right?
I'm pretty sure it was red and green because it was
Was it?
Charizard and
Okay.
Venusaur.
Got it.
But I did get a copy. By the way, when I was out in Japan this last time, or 2 times ago maybe, I did find a copy, like an in-box copy of Pokemon Green, and I snagged it.
Nice.
So I have that in my display
That is cool.
case now.
That's a nice cartridge to have, just because it's like, yeah.
It was more expensive than I wanted it to be because like retro game prices, particularly in Akihabara, have skyrocketed, and that was the part of town that I was in.
Yeah.
But I
yeah.
was like, oh, that's one of the
That's
ones
where
I
all those
really
shops
want.
are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet potato and stuff.
So the team also included functionality with the Game Boy Advance wireless adapter, so people could trade and battle without the need for a link cable. And the then president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, thought this was a particularly big deal for bringing the series forward. And I know we already kind of decided what is and isn't a remake. Like Yellow is, we're not going to consider a remake, but
So. Yeah.
Fire Red, Leaf Green are absolutely remakes.
Yeah.
But according to Pokemon Company president Sinakazu Ishihara, this is not a remake. So in a 2004 interview with IGN, Ishihara said, quote, "We don't feel that this is a remake at all. We feel that this is a new game with wireless technology."
Man, I don't I don't know if anybody really used that wireless technology. It was pretty inconsistent. Like it did not work very well,
Yeah.
you know?
So, I would agree with you 100%, and I disagree with Ishihara, despite him being like we always point towards like, all right, is Yoshi's Island a mainline Mario game? And then like on Game Informer we had like quotes from Takashi Tezuka and Shigeru Miyamoto saying yes, these are mainline. This is a mainline Mario game, and that's kind of like, okay, well we'll bow to them. But
Well,
for
now,
this, for some reason,
now it's all up in the air because you can't Google that and find that article anymore. So
there's always the Internet Archive.
that's true. Bless you,
But
Internet Archive.
I'm gonna go against the grain here with Ishihara and say like, nah, this is
Sorry, Ishihara.
absolutely a remake. Sorry, Mr. Ishihara. But there's an all new post game section of Fire Red and Leaf Green where you actually visit 5 additional islands where you can find Generation 2 Pokemon. So that's a little fun
That's
thing.
cool.
And then you get like the legendary that shows up in that segment is determined by what starter you chose at the beginning of the game. So like Suicune, Raikou, whatever.
Mhm.
So Fire Red Leaf Green came out on September 9th, 2004, earned an 81 on Metacritic, including an 8 out of 10 from Game Informer. Next up, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and this is the reason that we are doing this segment in the first place. It is a 2010 DS remake of the 1999 Game Boy Color games Pokemon Gold and Silver.
Yeah.
And I'm going to butcher this name, unfortunately. Shigeki Morimoto wanted to approach these remakes. He was the director of these with reverence to the original games. There was an Iwata Asks interview that I dug up, which they're harder to find than they should be at this point.
Really? Yeah. I haven't looked at those in a while.
But Morimoto said, quote, "The first thing that I knew I needed to bear in mind was to respect the feelings of those people who'd played Gold and Silver 10 years before. I think that players have very strong memories of the game, so they think things like, this trainer is still strong, and if I do this here, this is going to happen. I knew I needed to respect these feelings." And then going beyond that, at the same time, he wanted to make players feel kind of the same way they did when they played the original games a decade earlier. So he still felt like, despite this adherence to the original source material, he also wanted to add new elements as well.
Mhm.
And these games were the first ones in the series that shows a Pokemon walking around with the trainer on the map. And as a way to celebrate that, as we've talked about a couple of times on this episode
Wait,
already,
it says, doesn't Yellow do that?
Pikachu does, but like this is the first one where you can have any of them.
Oh, okay. You could pick. Got it.
Yeah, you could like be okay. Well, I want this Pokemon to be the one that walks around with me.
Right.
So in celebration of that, they released the Pokewalker, which was the pedometer that we've referenced a few times here. That you could load your Pokemon in, walk around with them in real life. It was meant to like symbolize like increasing your bond with them, and you would earn various rewards. Like they would find stuff while they're out on the walk with you.
Yeah.
And that has been kind of retrofitted into Pokemon Go as well. Like you can have a buddy Pokemon, and they will find stuff for you, like items and everything, as you walk around, which is a cool homage to this idea.
Yeah, I loved the Pokewalker. Like I thought that was so cool. I remember clipping it to my my shoe when I was working. I was working at a newspaper at the time, and I'm still to this day a big foot tapper. I'm kind of like an anxious foot tapper. So I would have that on my foot all day, and I remember trying to put it on my cat's collar, and like and then I remember trying to put it on. I clipped it to because it had a clip on it, like it was built in, and I remember I clipped it to my ceiling fan. And then I turned on the ceiling fan, and it just like flew off immediately. And I'm like, but it survived. But it was like that stuff was so fun and weird. Like I was so into that of just like trying to experiment with this little piece of extra hardware. I thought it was so cool. I miss it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they've tried to recreate it. Like there was, we'll talk about one of the peripherals later on that came with another remake. But Pokemon Go Plus, that's probably a spiritual successor to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's why I like. But like that was a thing that I was so charmed about early on with Pokemon Go, and buying that extra device it was like, yeah, this is like the Pokewalker. Yeah,
it really was. And there was a button that you could catch wild Pokemon while you were walking around. You had no idea what they were. It was like, am I catching a Snorlax or am I catching a Caterpie?
Yeah, no,
never know.
Cool.
So getting back to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they settled on the name because they realized that the connection between trainers and the Pokemon had become so central to the Pokemon series that they wanted to incorporate heart and soul in the names.
Mm.
So that makes sense.
Do
And
you,
then on top of the Pokewalker, most of the new features introduced in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum also appeared in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, including the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection for training and trading and battling. So Heart Gold and Soul Silver released on March 14th, 2010, received an 87 on Metacritic, including an 8.5 out of 10 from Game Informer.
we did it.
We did it. And honestly, that is probably my favorite Pokemon game overall. I mean, nostalgia aside, because if you go straight nostalgia, it's like red, blue, yellow.
Yeah. I mean, I have a bunch that I played with through professional obligation, but like when I was just playing Pokemon for fun, it was Gold and then later Heart Gold, like those were the big ones for me.
Yeah. Next up is one we've talked about already, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
Which I reviewed. Yeah.
So this 2014 3DS remake of the 2002 Game Boy Advance games Ruby and Sapphire. So pretty self-explanatory there.
Yep.
Not a lot of information about the development of this particular set of games, but there is an excerpt that I found online from the Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire guidebook that the team only had a year of development to make this game. So very Majora's Mask-esque there.
Yeah, I actually quite like those. It's too bad I can't go find my review, Brian, easily. But I remember there was a very simple thing about it where it was like it was very easy to pull up a list of like which Pokemon were in which locations, and it was better at giving you a checklist of like, you've caught every type of Pokemon that you can catch in this area. And I just was like, that I love that for Pokemon. Like I just, you know what I mean? Like I just liked that sort of like making it a very digestible list. And it was good otherwise. I like that game.
Yeah, I enjoy knowing when like, oh, there's still something I can catch in this region. Like that was great.
Yeah. And I don't know if I don't think that really continued in a big way. I just assumed that was going to be like, part of every Pokemon game moving forward, but I don't think it really was, unless I could totally be misremembering.
I want to say maybe it was in Sword and Shield.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know though. I don't quote me on that. But on top of that innovation that you're talking about, the team also added an entire post-game epilogue called Delta Episode, which introduced new characters and a story that involved catching Rayquaza to stop a meteor that holds Deoxys from crashing into the planet.
Yeah, all right. It's a vague memory of that, yeah.
Yeah, so Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire also implemented the 3D graphics that were capable on the 3DS, while adding some elements from Pokemon X and Y, like being able to fly around on Latios or Latias. And then, of course, Mega Evolutions.
This game I put tons of time into. I remember all this, yeah. That was a rare instance at the Game Informer office where Nintendo brought us a playable build of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and we got to fly around in the game. Like, that was so rare. Like, Nintendo usually didn't bring us Pokemon to play for, like, previews or features, really. So that was cool.
So because there were Mega Evolutions, that meant the development team also had to create several new forms of various Pokemon from this generation. The games came out November 21st, 2014, and received an 82 or 83 out of 100 on Metacritic, depending on which version you're talking about. Some guy named Kyle Hilliard gave it an 8.75 on Game Informer.
See, it's a pretty high score. I like that one.
Pretty good.
And just for the record, I believe this is the infamous Too Much Water IGN review, right?
Yes.
100% agree with that sentiment. I totally get where they're coming from. And like, it was not fun to spend so much time in water during the last quarter of that game. So I get it. And I think that was a good, summarized bullet point at the end of that review.
Yeah, definitely like out of context where it's just like, oh, too much water. But like, if you understand what they're saying, it is perfectly valid criticism.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's been memed into oblivion, unfortunately. Next up, we have the 2018 Switch remake of Pokemon Yellow, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee.
Played some of this one. Yeah, I remember this one. Yeah.
So this was coming off of the success of Pokemon Go because, that came out in 2016, and then this was the 2018 release. So this was pretty hot on the tail of Pokemon Go, and the series was experiencing a ton of new attention. I've talked about how like just multimedia games or multimedia experiences that are adapted from games, like the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. When that came out in 2020, I talked to Takashi Iizuka, the head of Sonic Team, and he was like, yeah, I've never seen this influx of attention for the Sonic
Mm.
series as I am this. I would imagine it was similar for Pokemon Go with the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, where they're like, holy crap, like there are so many people playing Pokemon stuff right now.
Yeah.
So because of that, Junichi Masuda wanted to create a game geared towards a younger audience or for people who are new to Pokemon. And Masuda felt that Yellow was the closest to adapting the anime to a mainline game, so it would be a good one to appeal to like casual fans or children.
Mhm.
And since they were remaking Pokemon Yellow, which has the subtitle Special Pikachu Edition, Pikachu was an obvious choice for one of the mascots to include. And according to an article on The Verge that I dug up from 2018, Masuda actually was considering Psyduck as the other mascot,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he said he didn't like having both versions be yellow. So he wanted to choose something that was a different color.
That's fair. I get it. Yeah.
And here's a quote from Masuda from that Verge article saying, quote, looking at what Pokemon were available, we saw that a lot of fans would make their own fan art illustrations of Eevee. A lot of people. It was pretty obvious to tell they thought it was really cute. It's kind of like not really a dog, not really a cat, something in between, a very different color from Pikachu. And also, I have my own little piece of history to like add to this context here. So, Kyle, you were actually originally slated to go on this cover story trip to Tokyo, and then unfortunately, you were laid
Yeah.
off like 3 weeks prior.
I think we've talked about it on All Things Nintendo, where it was like, yeah, I had actually been working on that cover story for months. Like it took a lot to set that up.
And then you were all set to go, and then you got laid off. And I'm literally in Germany at Gamescom, like reeling from the news that like half the staff has been laid off. And I get a message from now, or not now, but most recent editor in chief, Matt Miller, who was the head of the previews department at the time, saying, hey, like, I know we're all kind of going through like this layoff, but do you want to go to Japan like 2 weeks from now to do the Pokemon Sword and
Came
Shield
together
cover
fast,
story?
right? Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, I mean, I obviously wanted to, but like, I was so like like in shock kind of from like what was going down. And while I was out there though, because this was Sword and Shield, which came immediately after Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I talked to both Masuda and Shigeru Omori, who is the director of Sword and Shield, and also I think Scarlet and Violet. And they were talking to me. I was asking them like, "Oh, what did you learn from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee?" And they basically told me that they used the development of that game as a way to better understand how to create a game for consoles,
Hmm.
since it was the first mainline Pokemon RPG to be fully made for a console. So they were like, yeah, this is basically like we're using the blueprint of Red and Blue, like, probably the most basic game in terms of town layout, game mechanics, all that stuff, and like basically using this as like, all right, how much do we really have to ramp up in order to create these HD assets? Because like
Mhm.
3DS to Switch, that is a monumental leap ahead in terms of like the quality of assets and the scale of everything. So yeah, that was a pretty good test case for them to try and just see how hard it is to make a console game.
Yeah. Which they started strong and then they forgot how it worked
Yeah,
recently. I
they're
don't know.
like, oh wait, this is actually easy. Then they put out Scarlet and Violet. They're like, oh wait, never mind.
Oops.
So on top of being the first RPG in the mainline series to be put out on consoles, the graphics are also a massive leap forward. But this version changed wild Pokemon encounters to be more like Pokemon Go, which I think is a very bad decision.
Right.
So instead of battling wild Pokemon, you actually use motion controls to time and throw your Pokeball to catch them. So because of this, you couldn't use a Pro controller, which is absurd to me because that's the only way that I play my Switch, basically. So the options were you could use the Joy Cons and then like do a throwing motion to do it, which I hated doing that. There was also the Pokeball Plus, which
Yes.
was just a tiny little Pokeball. It had a joystick that you could click in as a button as well. And then it also had motion controls. So you could use that to throw, but you still had to aim, you still had to time your throw and everything. The best way to play Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee was to play it in handheld mode because that way you didn't have to like do like a throwing motion. You could just press the A button and it would throw the ball. And it's like, why is that not available on the Pro Controller?
Yeah, that is surprising. Yeah.
I don't know. It was a very weird design decision.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah,
capital,
I guess
go
like
ahead.
they said, they just wanted it for kids who would get a joy out of the motion of, doing this, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
If wild Pokemon encounters were handled differently, I think this would be one of my favorite Pokemon games.
Yeah.
But because of
Really?
the motion
Okay.
controls, because of like the fact that you're not battling wild Pokemon, it just feels so watered down.
Yeah.
But I love everything else about it. Like the main, like I adore the Gen 1 story and seeing all those characters in like modern graphics, like beyond anything I ever thought I would see in the Pokemon franchise. Like when I was a kid, like I was like, Pokemon Stadium is the best this game will ever look.
Yeah, it's just, we're not getting any better than this.
And now I look at the like what we get even in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which is still very rudimentary in terms of like modern visuals, but like Scarlet and Violet, performance issues aside, it's a pretty good looking game. Like the character models and everything are good.
Yeah, it's good art.
Um, so to capitalize on this new graphical power that they had with the Switch, and to also veer closer to Pokemon Go, they decided to make it so the Pokemon appear in the overworld, which is the first time that happened, where you can, instead of going into the tall grass and having random encounters, you would just see them roaming around. You could run up and initiate the wild Pokemon encounter there. And then there was also a feature that you could transfer Pokemon between Pokemon Go and Let's Go.
Mm.
There's also drop in, drop out co-op exploration, which was also another way
Yep.
to
Yep.
make it so that there was like a kind of a more casual appeal, because they made it so that it was easier to catch wild Pokemon. If like you both did the motion at the same time, it would be like a super throw that doubled your chances of catching that Pokemon. And you could also team up on other trainers, so it made it a little bit easier to get through the story if you were having trouble.
Is that the only like truly co-op Pokemon? Mainline Pokemon?
You could do Scarlet and Violet co-op. Like you could do up
Really?
to 4 players exploration.
Oh. Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Was
Okay.
there co-op in Sword and Shield's wild area? I don't think so. Maybe.
Man, yeah, we sound like fools right now. I'm sure
I
people
mean,
are
this was
screaming.
also
I
2020.
apologize.
This is
Yeah.
5 years ago that Pokemon Sword and Shield
But
came
I mean,
out.
it's like probably,
Or
I guess, yeah,
2019.
Scarlet and Violet, right? You could just like, you could play the full thing together. But yeah, I guess that's probably the most co-op friendly Pokemon game, honestly, is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Yeah.
Yeah, and here's the weird thing. So there was like I said, it's a remake of Pokemon Yellow, essentially. And in that game, you can't evolve Pikachu. So what they did was they were like, all right, well, neither Pikachu nor Eevee can evolve, which is fine, and I get it because it's a remake of that. But like, isn't that Eevee's entire thing?
That's right. Yeah, you've picked the one that your favorite form of Eevee. Yeah.
There's a word coined, evolutions. Like, come on.
That is very strange. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
And then finally, in the name of streamlining the experience, Pokemon breeding and HMs are not in this game.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah, just a very simplified, scaled back Pokemon game, right?
yeah, very much so. So Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee arrived on November 16th, 2018. Got a 79 or 80 on Metacritic, depending on the version. And that includes an 8.5 out of 10 from some jamoke called Brian Shea at Game Informer. And that brings us to the final game remake anyway. We have a special final entry that we'll get to after this. But Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, 2021 Switch remakes of the 2006 DS games Diamond and Pearl. They were not developed by Game Freak, but rather Ilka, which is another studio. But Junichi Masuda from Game Freak still co-directed, just to kind of have like an overseeing position in the development. And then, Game Freak's flagship game was Pokemon Legends Arceus, which was a regional prequel to Diamond and Pearl, the Sinnoh region. They did the Hisui region in Arceus, which was like what it was called before it was established as the Sinnoh region. So I guess Gen 4 remakes made sense for the franchise at the time.
Yeah.
And then this version actually followed extremely closely to the original Diamond and Pearl releases, but added character customization, the ability to decorate Pokeballs. The Union Room was added, super contest shows, Pokemon walking behind their trainers, and then a full revamp of the Underground, which was then called the Grand Underground. And then, unfortunately, when it came out, the game was pretty glitchy, but they fixed a lot of them in post-launch patches, and it received a 73 on Metacritic, which with an 8.5 coming from Game Informer.
It's a pretty forgotten Pokemon game, if I'm
It
being
really
blunt.
is.
It's like not one that I don't think people weren't really jazzed about it. I don't know. It's like that generation is weird, Diamond and Pearl. You know, I understand revisiting it, but yeah, I don't know. It's not. It hasn't stayed in the conversation of Pokemon. You know, and I don't really know why that is because it seemed fine from most perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, I played, I want to say halfway through it, and I kind of fell off. And it wasn't because the game's not good. It was
Did
just
you not review
because,
that one for
no, I
me?
didn't. I think it was, might have been John Carson
Oh, okay, cool.
who reviewed that for us. I don't have that information handy. It was not me though. I did not review
Right.
that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we are due for another remake though. Like,
Well, I mean the way the timeline works, right? It's kind of like they've established this pattern where they're going back and forth, right? So
yeah,
like
2004 to 2009, that's 5 years. Then 2009 to 2014, that is 5 years. Then 2000 2014 to 2018, that's 4 years. And then 2018 to 2021, that's 3 years. So yeah, between 3 and 5 years is the cadence that we get these remakes.
in which in black and white is next in line, right?
Either black and white or gold and silver. I would personally prefer gold and silver, but yeah,
Again,
I don't know. I just, because like heart, or just put heart gold and soul silver on Switch and we'll all be happy.
we'll all be happy. Yeah,
Nobody
it would
would
be
complain
nice.
about that.
It would be really cool to get a Scarlet Violet approach to the world of, you know, red and blue or gold and silver. You know what I mean? Like a 3D sort of area that you can explore that isn't gated, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I recognize that that's basically an entirely different game, but it would be cool.
And then finally, Kyle, do you have your Ancient Mew Pokemon card from back when you saw Pokemon the first movie in theaters?
I did see that movie in theaters, but I don't believe I was given a card at the time. Yeah.
What? I got a card and it disappeared somewhere over the years. So when I was in Japan back in July to see Metaphor Refantasio, I made it a point to go to some Pokemon card stores because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I grabbed an Ancient Mew Japanese card.
That's cool.
So I was pretty stoked about that to, like, you know, add that back to my collection. But that's the final remake that we're going to cover here. Pokemon Mewtwo Strikes Back. It is a 2019 shot-for-shot remake of the 1998 theatrical release, but it was made for Netflix. And the Pokemon Company decided to go for 3D graphics instead of hand-drawn animation.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah, forgot about this.
And the reason they wanted to do that was because they wanted to show a different dimension of the Pokemon world that traditional animation could not show, and also somewhat demonstrate how much technology has progressed in the time since the original. We actually, I think, did a watch along that you can find on YouTube. I think it was me, maybe Reiner, and Jeff Cork.
Like a commentary?
Yeah, we did like a commentary track for this movie. I believe it's still probably on the Game Informer YouTube channel if you want to go find that. Back in 2020. I think this was like right before COVID shut everything down. But Kyle, do you have a favorite remake from this list?
I mean, like you, I think I gotta go Heart Gold. And although I will say a close second might be Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, because I did quite like those games, even though I had no nostalgia really for the originals. I didn't play Ruby and Sapphire really. But yeah, I mean, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, I think, and Omega Ruby, I think is my list. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say Heart Gold, Soul Silver, they're being objectively the best ones on the list, but Fire Red and Leaf Green, I will always have a soft spot in my heart. Like,
sure.
I love the Gen 1 story, the Gen 1 Pokemon, the gym leaders are great in Generation 1. I can, you know, name and picture all of them and probably tell you who their best Pokemon is. But Kyle, let me ask you this. Do you think the requests for remakes would quiet down even just a little bit if the Pokemon Company would just freaking put the classic games on Switch?
I don't know, because I desperately think they need to be there. Right? But when they came to 3DS, I mean, did that move the needle at all? Is it more just that people want them to exist? Like, it makes them feel comfortable, right? It's just to know that it's there.
Just having it on your device
makes
just
you
like have
knowing
a
that it's
blanket.
available. It's like, yeah, like I don't know that people really actually go and play it and like feel satiated by Pokemon as much as I just want to make sure it's an option for them to get. But maybe I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I remember when Red and Blue came to 3DS. In the Game Informer office, there were a couple of people like got really excited about it. Like I remember, I think like Dan Tack. I
Dan
remember like
Tack was so
played
excited
and
for it.
beat it. I think right, but no one will ever be happy ever about anything. So no, I don't think it will.
I would play the crap out of Fire Red and Leaf Green and Heart Gold Soul Silver.
Yeah.
If they put that on Switch tonight, I would probably start up a new save file and start playing it. Probably, I mean, if they put them both on there, I'd start with Fire Red Leaf Green and then go to what is essentially a direct sequel in
I mean, it would
Heart
be
Gold Soul Silver.
nice to get at this point like a sort of, you know how they have the Castlevania collections, Dominus and stuff like that. I think that should be the Pokemon approach. I feel like they should release like Red and Blue and
the Game
and
Boy collection being like
stuff.
Red, Blue,
yeah,
Red, Blue, Silver, Gold, and then like Yellow, and then like on like do a Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS collections.
Because like the thing is like I pay for Nintendo Online and I would love for those Pokemon games to appear in that library, and it feels weird that they're not there. But like for the casual gamer who has a lot of affection for Pokemon, I think that they just want to be able to buy it straight up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like if I tell someone it's like, oh yeah, I loved Pokemon Blue when I was a kid. I wish I could play it on Switch. And I was like, well, actually, you could sign up for Nintendo Online and then you get a library. And it's like I'm already giving them too many steps. You know what I mean? So like I wonder if that's why they hold it back, because they know how valuable it is. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. They need to. They should be there. They should be on Switch. Switch 2 launch day. Come on, bring it on.
My theory is it's going to be next year's Pokemon Day, because that is going to be the 30th anniversary.
Right, but you can't assume that the Pokemon company is ever going to do the thing.
But hey, they put Red, Blue, Yellow on 3DS for the 20th anniversary.
Did they? Okay, all right. See, that's something.
That was 2016, and that's when they put it on the 3DS. So that's why I'm thinking they're going to put a lot of the games on Nintendo Switch Online or just release them as like standalone things on the eShop on the 30th anniversary.
Are the soundtracks on the Nintendo Music Player app?
I don't think so.
Okay, because that's probably what they'll do. That'll be their big celebration.
Oh God! But Kyle,
we'll take it. But
we're going to take our final break of this episode. And when we get back, it's time for definitive ranking. We will be right back. We are back, and it is time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. Since this main segment focused on Pokemon Remakes, Kyle, I wanted to have a little fun this week and get your most wanted Nintendo remakes. So you know the drill. Start at 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two about each.
Okay. Right. Do I like this order? Maybe not, but I'm going to go with it. The first one I want, and it's very specific, I would love a remake of Link to the Past, which I'm sure is, on a lot of people's list. But what I want, which is like a tall order, is I don't want like a Grezzo style Link's Awakening remake. That's just like, it's still fully a 2D Zelda, but with 3D character models. I want it like, we're looking at Ocarina, like Twilight Princess era structure, camera behind the shoulder, full 3D controls. I want to explore the world of Link to the Past in that sort of setting, which I know it's not that easy a translation necessarily.
I like it.
Right? Like it's like it would be difficult. They would have to change the game a lot. The dungeons would be structured very differently.
Yeah, the puzzles would be completely different.
I want to walk around that world with a new perspective. I would happily take a Grezzo style game. I would like, Link's Awakening, like like that, but for Link to the Past, I think would be very charming and I would enjoy it. But like if they're gonna revisit Link to the Past, I want it to be behind the shoulder camera, like totally re-examining that whole game. I think would be interesting. Number 4, I don't know, should I let you discuss these or should we hold for you?
I would be all about that. Okay, I think that it would be very cool to get that, and I will have not really a similar entry on my list, but you'll see what I mean when we get to it.
Yeah, and this will be a theme. There's at least one other that I feel this way about, but I would love a remake of Earthbound.
Okay.
But I would, but this one I don't mind if it sort of retains the sort of perspective of Earthbound, as long as it fully embraces the clay animated art style of the box art and stuff like that. I want it to look like the whole thing is made out of clay, like stop
Mm.
motion. You know, I want it to look like the little figures that were on the, like, have you seen, do you know what I'm talking about, Brian? If you look at the box art for Earthbound, it's like they're like little, they look like little clay action figures, sort of. I'm gonna look it up too, real quick.
Because I've always seen the one with the alien.
Oh right, yeah. So where does that art show
Is it
up then? It
Mother?
must be in the strategy guide or something, where they like made all these little Earthbound characters and like photographed them and stuff like that. It's like a, yeah, if you look up like the strategy guide, you can kind of see it. Like they look like little action figures. But I would
Okay.
love a version of Earthbound that looked like that. As someone made Mother 3, they made like a sample like video where they kind of showed what a Mother 3 remade to look like that might look like, and it looked incredible. So I would love to see Earthbound revisited that way. My third one is Super Mario 64, which is like it's a weird one to call out because like every 3D Mario has been sort of a remake of Mario 64 in a way, but I think it's Galaxy, was it Galaxy 2 has the throwback Galaxy, or was that Galaxy 1? I guess it doesn't really
Oh
matter.
God. Well,
But
then
they
also
had,
Odyssey had an homage to Mario 64 as well.
yes, it totally does. And like I remember being a little bummed in Galaxy that the throwback Galaxy was just a one-off, because I really thought we were going to get more of those like 64 levels, but I just love that. I just want like modern Mario's visuals just applied to the entirety of Mario 64.
And
I would
modern
love
Mario
that.
controls,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
as somebody who just went back and played Super Mario 64 3 weeks ago from start to finish, some of those controls can be a little frustrating, especially the camera. Good lord.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. And like they showed that they can do an awesome version of it in Galaxy. Like that level is so much fun. So I would love that. I would love that sort of approach to the entirety of Super Mario 64. And this next one, number 2, is a little bit like my Earthbound request, where it's like I
Okay.
want to see Earthbound, but in the art style that you use to promote it. Right? I want Donkey Kong Country, but I want it to look like the box art. I want it to, that early CGI sort of like a little bit too shiny. You know what I'm talking about? Like I want the box art of Donkey Kong Country like proper, like made for the entirety of Donkey Kong Country, you know? Like I want it to look like that game is so strange how they did it, where they made the 3D models and then they scanned like the frames of the 3D model to convert them into like 16-bit or whatever, however that
Hmm.
approach was. But I want Donkey Kong Country, but I don't want it to look like Returns or Tropical Freeze. I want it to look like the Donkey Kong Country box art, that weird sort of transitional 3D modeling that they were figuring out at the time. You know, the
Also,
fingers don't look right. You know?
shameless plug, if you want to hear more about how Donkey Kong Country happened on Super Nintendo, go back a few months and listen to my discussion with Kevin Bayless
Right?
about
Yeah.
the creation of Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong for Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, see, I want that. Like, it would be very much for me, I think, right? Like, if they're going to do more Donkey Kong Country, which presumably there's more Donkey Kong Country, there's a lot of Donkey Kong stuff
Really
happening
hope
lately.
so.
I imagine it will look great. You know, he'll have great hair physics, but I just want that weird Donkey Kong Country look. You know, that's what I want.
Honestly, this is not on my list, but this is like you're like, I mean, I'll let you do your number one before I say what I'm going to do, but like you're sparking an idea for me that would be incredible. But I'll do your number one, and then I think I know what your number one is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Is it okay? My number one. I'm curious if you guessed it. Zelda 2.
Oh no, but
Okay,
that I was on the right track, but it was the wrong Zelda.
because that's like that is the Zelda I have like the least sort of experience with, I guess you could say, because it was so unique and different. And I remember I got on an airplane trip once with the goal of like, I'm going to try to beat Zelda 2. I'm going to get as far as I
Oh
can.
God.
It's a very challenging game. It's very difficult. So I would like I would like a version, like a contemporary version that sort of addresses some of the challenge of it, but maintains what was so strange about it, like the sort of like RPG elements of it and the overworld and switching to 2D. Like this one, like I would want a straight sort of like approach to Zelda 2, because it's just the one that I've like never really engaged with in a real way. And if they
Same.
were to fully remake it, like that would be a an awesome excuse to just finally dig into Zelda 2 and try to understand it. So that's the one that I want. I want them to remake Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, because it's such a strange entry in the total franchise. It's the
Well,
only Zelda that
remember,
isn't legendary, you know?
remember that the Prince of Persia Lost Crown studio, one of the designers did a Reddit AMA, and they're like, "What's your dream game?" And he was like, "I'd love to remake Zelda 2."
Yeah, that'd be amazing from the people behind Prince of Persia. That'd be fantastic. Do
Yeah,
it.
unfortunately, those the developers got kind of absorbed into other projects, and
Yeah, they all just sort of got scattered to the wind at Ubisoft, and
it's
I
better than
guess
being laid off. But like, it's still a bummer that that team was kind of disbanded after putting out one of the best games of last year.
yeah. I was just thinking of like the sort of legalese of it all. That like, would Nintendo hire Ubisoft to make a Zelda 2? And it's like they did the Rayman game. Like they might do something like that. It would be
They
weird,
did
but
Mario plus Rabbids.
yeah, that was more of like a collaboration, though. I wonder if they would. I don't think Ubisoft would fully make a Zelda game for Nintendo in the way Capcom has. You
Yeah, I
know,
was
I
gonna
don't
say
think Ubisoft
Capcom
would
has
do
done
that.
it. Omega Force has done Hyrule
Yeah,
Warriors.
yeah, yeah,
Crypt of the Necrodancer, that developer did Rift, Cadence of Hyrule. So
yeah.
there's a precedent there for
There's
giving.
a precedence for Nintendo hiring a developer, but the other way around. I don't know that Ubisoft would want to make a game in a franchise wholly for a different company.
Yeah, I
You
don't
know, I
know.
don't know, but I'd be
I
open to
think
it.
that if Nintendo comes to you and says, "Hey, we want your developer to make a Zelda game," I think that that
Yeah,
might
it's like
be a
yeah,
special occasion.
yeah, I think you would agree to do that just for the sake of doing it, as opposed to like the sort of financial viability of it, of just being like the opportunity itself. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's my list. Yeah.
All right. Well, the thing that sparked in my head when you were going through, like, I want the box art of this, I would love like a Mario All Stars. So, like Mario 1, Mario 2, Lost Levels, Mario 3, in like the original key art style of Super Mario Brothers.
Oh
Like
yeah,
the
yeah.
drawings that were put out for that, like the concept key art
That was
stuff.
who's the artist? What's his name? Is it Katase? Is that? I could be wrong
Um,
about that.
I am not sure,
Okay.
but
Anyway, there's that really specific Mario art. And I remember we got a chance to speak with Miyamoto, and Ben Hansen, now of MinMax, like pitched Miyamoto on that game. Is
oh
like, could you?
really?
He was like, make a 2D Mario, but using that wonderful art, you know. And Miyamoto like politely nodded and was like, yes, thank you.
Yes, nobody has ever pitched a game to me before.
Yes, right. So yes, I agree with you, and Ben also agrees with you that that would be fantastic. Yeah.
But that's not one of my entries. But one of my entries is kind of close to that, and that is Super Mario World. You know, I have a lot
Mhm.
of love for that game,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but in the Mario Wonder art style.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
I
that'd be
think that
cool.
that art style is so expressive. It's such a beautiful game, and it's so colorful and vibrant in the ways that Mario World felt when it first came out on SNES. But now you look at it and it's like, oh yeah, like we've come a long way. And I would never want Mario World in like the new Super Mario Brothers style, but I think
Yeah.
Mario Wonder fits Mario World's vibe so perfectly.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah, and by the way, it's Kotabe is the artist I was
Kotabe,
thinking of.
yes, that
Yoichi
I was like, it's
Kotabe.
not
Yeah,
Katase because that's the
yeah,
guy from Final Fantasy.
right. Yeah, I was like, I was a couple consonants off,
Yes.
but yeah, no, that sounds cool. I think Mario Wonder would fit that very well. Yeah, or that art direction. Yeah,
Number 4 for me is going to be Pokemon Gold and Silver. I would love it if
just again.
whether it's in Scarlet Violet style or just like, you know, a straight up modernized remake similar to Let's Go Pikachu Eevee or Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. Like people keep saying like, "Oh, they should do Let's Go Johto." And it's like I would not be opposed to that.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's my number 4. Number 3, we talked about it earlier on in the news segment, but man, just remake Star Fox 64. Just like do a modern version of that game, give us like additional customization or whatever, but like you don't have to change the bones of that game. That is a great game. It has branching pathways through the story, it has optional objectives, it has an amazing cast,
yeah,
very good level design, very very intense boss fights at times, lots of secrets to discover. For a game that takes like 2 maybe 3 hours to get through the entire campaign, it is shockingly replayable.
Yeah,
And
and they remade it for 3DS. It is
they
great.
did.
I would love just you can bring that to Switch. I'd be okay with that. I think that's a great. It was a great remake. It looked good on 3DS.
Hmm. Number two for me, I'm going Super Mario 64 as well for all the
Oh,
reasons that
really?
you stated. I think, if they did Mario 64 in like the Mario Odyssey art style and like controls and everything, it would be one of the greatest experiences you could have on the Switch or Switch 2, whatever it comes out on.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
And then my number one, this is the one I thought you were going to go with, but it's the one that I, similar to Ben Hansen, I pitched this to Eiji Aonuma a couple years ago. That is an Ocarina of Time remake.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, hey, like your Star Fox entry, my counter to that is it exists.
but you have to dust off a 3DS. You can't
Yeah,
either if you're not going to put that on there. My pivot is this is the one I was talking about where it's like, hey, do this, but in the style of another game.
yeah,
Ocarina of Time, but in the style of like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, where it's like, okay, well, Hyrule Field back on the N64, that was like this seemingly endless space, but
yeah,
now you go back and play it and it's like pretty small. But if you could make Hyrule Field feel like the Hyrule of Breath of the Wild and like so explorable and like all these secrets, but then also all these iconic points of interest and destinations all over it, like Lon Lon Ranch and Kakariko Village and obviously
yeah.
Hyrule Castle, like that would be awesome.
I mean, I wouldn't even need it to be expanded in a big way because like we have that game with the big open field exploration full of stuff, right? Like we have two of those with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I would like it to it can keep that smaller scale.
Hmm.
Like it can really be one to one and I would be okay with it and I would just be happy to have the ability to explore the whole of Ocarina of Time without having to go through loading gates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a seamless transition from Kakariko into the field. Like that would be enough for me. I don't really need it to be so overhauled. But yeah, and I mean to be clear, like I would totally love that. But it is funny to me when people be like, they need to remake Ocarina of Time. Why haven't they done that? And my response always like, they did, and it was great. I love the 3DS version of Ocarina of Time.
So I do too. I mean, that was the version that up until Breath of the Wild came out. That I was between like Ocarina of Time and Final Fantasy X. It's like, all right, which one's my favorite game of all
Sure.
time?
Yeah.
And then I remember I played Ocarina of Time 3D while I was sleeping at my parents' house for like a week in between quitting my last job and moving to Minneapolis for Game Informer. I went home to Maryland and slept in my parents' house for like a week while I was like in between houses,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, let me fire up my 3DS because all my consoles were on like a moving truck going across the country. And I played through Ocarina of Time 3D in its entirety. And I'm like, as soon as I rolled credits, I was like, yep, that is absolutely my favorite game ever. So I
That's great.
understand. Like, that's a very good remake. The other
Bring that
option
to
that they
Switch.
have,
Star Fox, Majora's Mask, the Zelda, the 3DS games, bring those, just have them on Switch. It's
yeah,
fine. Do a
exactly.
Dominus collection. We'll take it.
Game development is easy. Just do
Yeah.
the easy. Yeah.
Just
So
file export Switch version.
so the other option that they have for an Ocarina of Time remake that I've made this point before on the show is people are so used to the big explorable like Ocarina or Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They need some entry point if they ever want to go back to like the linear or like more linear style. And the best way to do that, I think, is by remaking Ocarina of Time and being like, okay, it's a classic game, so people are not going to bat an eye if it goes back and like reverts back to like this older style. People
Right.
aren't going to feel cheated, like, oh my god, this is like a half step because it's like linear, it's not open the way the other one is. So this would be a good way to reintroduce that style to people who either have gotten so into Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that's all they want from the franchise,
Mhm.
or they have never played any games but Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom because the Switch is so successful and both those games sold so well. There's probably an entire subset of Zelda fans that have only ever played Breath of the Wild and or Tears of the Kingdom. And I think
Yeah.
Ocarina
Yeah.
of Time remake, the kind of the more linear style, if they want to go that approach, would be a great way to introduce them to this other side, and then they can carry the ball forward in that style if they so choose with a new entry a few years down the road.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough to say. I gave Ocarina to my daughter when it came to Switch. right? Like when the 64 version came to Switch, and she played it for like 20 minutes and didn't seem completely offended by it. Like she, it looks old, which is charming, but like, so I'm saying this with some admitted like bias, but it's like I think that game on a basic level holds up pretty well. Like I think if you just improve the visuals, I don't think you would be offended by the way it feels and controls and the structure and the pace of it. Like there are older games that are very hard to go back to. I don't think Ocarina of Time is that hard to go back to, but I could be totally off. Like maybe a younger player would be like, you're insane. This is like unplayable. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you're right.
I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifting that nostalgia will do. Like I've said,
Yes,
when I played
absolutely.
Mario 64, I was like, oh, this has not aged as well as I remember. It's still a great game,
Yeah.
but I played Majora's Mask for the first time in like 2023, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, this is very fun, but also it would be nice if there were some quality of life improvements the way the 3DS version did.
Yeah, you could see.
And I think the same could be said about Ocarina of Time, like especially the water temple. I mean, that's the cliche example. But before we wrap up here, I just want to give a programming note that I am going to pre-record next week's episode because I am actually moving. So if any news happens between now and the episode after next, I will cover it all on the subsequent episode. But yeah, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. As you know, my Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to get questions or comments in. But you can also get in touch with me, Brian at allthingsnintendo.com, or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. That is also my YouTube channel name, and if you would subscribe to the channel, it would help the show out. Kyle, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, Blue Sky. Truly. I'm enjoying my time on Blue Sky lately. And yeah, go follow me there.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons to the show. Abdullah, Adam Scott, Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Megan S., Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, and Zek 3 Sword Sama. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the show.